This weekend, I'm going to the 24 Hours of Le Mans for the first time in my life. It's a childhood dream coming true, and I'm definitely gonna share this experience with you guys when I'm back. But for now, I wanted to explore the other time the ACO and FIA introduced some other types of hypercars. Today, we'll be going back to 1998 and the height of the GT1 category. Now, before we get into the car to see what these GT1's felt like, let's try to understand what led up to the 1998 24-hour race. At the end of the 80s, the FIA was in a bit of a situation. In many ways, what transpired in the late 80s to early 90s is comparable to today's LMP1 versus hypercar debacle. The Group C category that got legendary cars involved in the history of Le Mans was failing. The high running cost of what were essentially F1 engines strapped to closed cockpits unique prototypes drove many manufacturers away from the event. And it surely didn't help that by the end of the Group C era, Porsche was dominating with its fleet of 962C prototypes engaged by privateers and the official teams. The ACO needed to bring changes, and they needed to do so quickly. So, from 1994 onwards, a new category was introduced. The GT1's were born. The idea was simple. To hype up car makers to come back to La Sarthe, the top category had to resemble modified road cars. See, the prototypes of the 80s only resembled a brand's road-going vehicle by the badge you would see on the nose of the cars. By making the public identify better with the winning cars at Le Mans, car brands could market their cars better, which would drive sales and make companies want to enter the great race again. Manufacturers that wanted to get involved in the project would either need to modify an existing road vehicle, or they needed to create a road-going version of the race cars they would bring to the track. Now, to say these regulations were quite open-ended would be an understatement. The ACO was desperate to get as many cars engaged as possible, and so GT1's didn't even require the road-going vehicles to actually go into production before the race cars could be raced. This of course opened the way for manufacturers to abuse these regulations. Also, prototypes were still allowed to enter. These were heavily regulated and had less power than the GT1 cars, but they were nimble and light. An interesting difference between these prototypes and Group C cars was that they had to have an open cockpit. In a way, the prototypes worked a bit like the modern-day LMP2 class, although these prototypes were very closely matched to the GT1's performance-wise. The final category that was added were the GT2's. These were modified touring cars that had to have at least 200 road-going vehicles made. This was a much slower secondary class to the race, but would create the structure to what would later end up becoming the GTE category. And with the scene set, let's head out to the track to see what these cars were like to drive. Here we are then on the grid for this race at Le Mans. We have a beautiful field of GT1s and prototypes ahead of us, and some GT2s that we're gonna have to deal with at the end of this race behind us. A pretty slow start as always in Assetto Corsa, so yeah, we're gonna have to deal with that, try and get into a rhythm at the start, try and avoid getting into a crash. It's not about the competitiveness, it's just a video about trying to get into the mindset of what it was like to drive in this 1998 version of Le Mans, this 1998 edition. The version of the track we're using is actually the 1991 layout of Le Mans, supposedly. And I think it looks pretty close to what would have been used in 1998, so that's why I decided to use it. There's a Porsche on the side of the road already, and we're just gonna get straight past that and talk a little bit about these cars that are around us. Of course, the beautiful McLaren F1 GTR Longtail that wasn't that successful, but of course the F1 was the car that inspired this whole GT1 class. Here behind us we have the Porsche GT1 98, which was the car that won this 98 edition of the Le Mans 24, and you will see that this is a very interesting field that we have ahead of us. Very colorful field, a lot of different cars, and probably one of the best years in Le Mans history when it comes to the amount of manufacturers and the amount of different cars that we had. We have this beautiful panels that we're driving in today, and a car that I personally absolutely love. There's another one here right ahead of us, so this is what it looks like from the outside view of the car. So you can see it right behind us. I do have to concentrate a little bit on my driving, but everyone seems to be a little bit all over the place. The field very, very tight in this starting phase of the race, of course. But yes, these panels, first race in '97, which is the year I was born in, so that's a first connection. And I also had a Scale X rig model of the LMP1 panels, which is the car that came after this one from Panos, a very small company that makes a couple of road-going cars and made some very interesting racing cars. Before they went to Le Mans, they actually made Formula-type cars, a bit like the Lara in a sense, but they did also incorporate the engines. In front of us is a bit of an anachronism in this 98 version of Le Mans, the Lotus GT1. This is a car that only partook in the 97 Le Mans race, but I decided to put it in here because it's such an iconic car and such a rare car that a lot of people probably don't know about. And that Lotus built for this sports prototype championship, they had 4 or maybe even 5 of them, but only ever engaged one, and it's the one with that specific design livery is what I'm meaning. This yellow car is the one that partook in Le Mans, and they did about 100 and so many laps. I think they didn't reach the finish line, but still a valiant effort and a very interesting looking car. There's also a road-going version of it, which is absolutely fantastic and was one of the requirements for partaking into the race, but it was not always the case. Not all manufacturers made the road-going versions. The sneaky manufacturers trying to get into Le Mans. Very difficult section for us, this last one, with the V8 sitting in front of us and very little aero on this car. I actually tried to set up the car to get as much out of the straight as possible, so we're gonna get a lot of overtakes in on the straights, and a lot less action is gonna happen in the corners, but that's fine. That's the way to do it at Le Mans anyway. You have so many long straights, so why would you risk it in the corners when it's an endurance race? But maybe we can get the car going, I was gonna say, out of this last corner, but very difficult, of course, with all the weight of the engine being at the front. It's kind of difficult to get the car going, but it's definitely a lot of fun. It's a very fun car, this one, the GTR1. I've tried all of the cars of this GT1 field made by Legion, which is probably one of the best Assetto Corsa converters, or well, modders I should say, in Assetto Corsa. There's another crush, and that's one of our teammates in the other panels, GTR1, I mean. And yeah, I've tried all of these cars, and the panels is just the most playful one, the one that I love playing with the most. It just slides out of the corners, but it's very easy to kind of control and slide about out of the corners. It's a very well-balanced car, despite the fact that the engine is all the way at the front, and that, well, a lot of the power from this huge V8 goes straight to the back wheels, and you have to control that. Also, we have the ABS on board, so kind of easy to brake in the corners, these very long braking zones at Le Mans without locking up, and that is definitely something that I really appreciate in this car. But when we're talking driver-wise, it's challenging, of course. These cars don't have that much downforce, they are quite heavy, and they handle the way you'd think they would handle. Also not that much grip from the slick tires, despite the car being fitted with slicks. I said how braking was easy, but you need to brake at the right moment, of course. But yeah, they really handle the way you would imagine a GT1 to handle, and it's just a heavy car, a lot of power, but very playful out of the corners, and quite easy to handle in that regard. Definitely having a lot of fun playing with these cars at Le Mans. And then of course the other class that we have here, are the Le Mans prototypes that are represented here by the Ferrari 333 SP, if I remember well. And that's the only prototype I have, because in Assetto Corsa apparently not many prototypes are being built for these years, but definitely a very different way of handling it. A lot more downforce, they are a lot faster in the last sector as well. And we actually have a second anachronism here today, which is this Ferrari F50. A beautiful, beautiful car, and probably one of the most performant cars to never ever race. And why am I saying that? Because they actually tested this F50 against the 333 SP, because they're both Ferraris. It was faster in the winter tests, but Ferrari decided to never enter it because they weren't in agreement with the ACO's way of handling this GT1 category. So in a very typical Ferrari way, they decided to just never enter it. And I was actually looking for pictures of it being used at Le Mans, but never raced at Le Mans, which is really a shame because it's a beautiful car, an awesome looking car, and a very, very fast one if it had ever entered the race, I'm sure. Then again, it might not have been that reliable, which is also a very important factor at Le Mans. But 1998, definitely the height of the GT1's. After that, this car that we have on our right would come in and win Le Mans. But even in the GT1 days, in most years, prototypes were actually very, very performant. And it was difficult for the GT1s. There was never really a GT1 year. Like, you would always have the prototypes and the GT1s fighting each other. Ooh, as we have a Ferrari down our inside. We see one of the prototypes actually flying there over the Mulsanne, well, bump there at the end of the straight. But this is not the right year for prototypes to be flying about. It's actually in 1999 that the Mercedes, the evolution of the CLK GTR, would go for a flight with Mark Webber on board, and it actually went flying twice. And that's what kind of sealed Mercedes' well, decision of leaving Le Mans behind them and not race there anymore with their prototypes, which is a real shame. Would have been very interesting to see what Mercedes could have done against Audi. So we got past one of the Toyota GT1's. Beautiful, beautiful car, and there you could really see that even though this is supposed to be a GT1 car, it looks so much like a prototype that, well, in '99 they just decided, you know what, let's merge this whole GT1 and prototype thing together. Here is the winner of the race in real life, who's gonna get past around our outside, because we just have so much more trouble getting our car chucked in this last sector. You can see so many differences with the modern layout of the track. The corners are still going the same way, of course, but around the track you will see a lot more grass, less gravel, definitely no paved road. Normally here there's like, it's just tarmac nowadays, but back in the day it was grass, and it makes it so much easier when you make a small mistake to just go sliding into the wall, as this Porsche stuck his nose down our outside instead of kind of letting go. But we still managed to get past, and that's us for the fourth time past this start-finish straight. Soon we're gonna start overtaking some back markers here. Ooh, and I believe that is something that is happening right ahead. The AI having some trouble getting past the GT2s. Massive, massive crashes here. It's actually what caused my PC to kind of slow down a little bit, unfortunately. Let's see if we can deal with them in a better way than the AI does, as we get past that beautiful CLK GTR that looks nothing like the road-going Mercedes Class S. Oh, not a risky overtake. Oh, it's gonna be difficult to get past this Porsche GT2. The GT2 field was absolutely packed with these Porsches in 97, 98, and even up until the 2000s. Just like nowadays with the Porsche RSR that is used by a lot of privateers. Well, back then I'm really struggling to get past this Porsche, but it gives us a very good view at it. And yeah, that's the main part of the field is these Porsches, and as well as some Dodge Vipers that were also synonymous with this end of 90s, beginning of the 2000s GT field. We're gonna see them pretty soon as the Mercedes brakes for no reason. We're just gonna get past them. That's our first Dodge Viper. Getting past him as the sun is setting. Let's see if we can get past these guys. How far can we go into the braking zone? Side by side for this last lap of the race. Let's see if we can go all the way to the first place in this race while getting past all these back markers. It looks absolutely amazing with these GT1's, GT2's. We go far off the track. Do a bit of an Alonso move like he did in 2016, I believe. There's also the Rise Storm, which is a very special car that is actually, it was used in 97, but not in 98. So it's another little difference, but it's always nice to try and kind of mix up a couple of years when you go back in past. Ooh, I thought it was gonna break a lot less. There's a very big difference in speed. In the Group C era, we had the Group C1 and then the Group C2, I believe, that were competing together, creating different car classes, but it looked very homogeneous. Here we have some different car classes with different speeds and everything, and I much prefer this way of racing that looks very much like what we have nowadays with the prototypes or the Le Mans hypercars, should I say, against the GTEs and GT8M. But look at that Dodge Viper's yellow headlights, absolutely amazing stuff. I absolutely love the look of it. If you decide to download this track, you must be aware this section here has some weird meshes with a little bit of bumps and jumps, so you need to be very much aware of that. Brake more than you think you should. Really go down to first gear and watch out to keep it on the inside as we get past the Dodge Viper there. The last back marker. Can we maybe get close enough to that Ferrari in the last sector? It's gonna be very, very difficult because he has a prototype. We have a slow, quite heavy GT1 car, but let's try. Brake as late as we can. Hold the speed through here. You can carry much more speed than you can. You think you can. Then stay in fourth here and then brake down to third for this section, which is actually quite deceptive. You need to really keep the inside, and then you can go up to fourth. Just about hit the inside of the curb there. But I think the Ferrari has us beat here as we see the beautiful scenery in this last sector with the lights and everything. And I can't wait to see this in real life and to hopefully show a nice video of it to you guys. But if you enjoyed this video, guys, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more amazing sim racing content. Leave a like and a comment if you have something to say about this video, and then I'll see you space racers in the next one. Goodbye.